this is Scott with I Want My MVC, and today we're going to look at how to set up an ASP.NET MVC project to use the Spark View engine. So let's get started. So the first thing I do is create a new project in Visual Studio. I pick Web and ASP.NET Web Application. I'm going to call it Spark Example App and click OK. Then I pick MVC. For this example I did no authentication and click OK. Visual Studio creates my project. You can see it's working on it there. And this will take just a little time. I'm using Community 2013, which is a bit outdated. Right click on the project and go to Manage NuGet Packages. And we're going to search online for spark.web.mvc5. That's the NuGet package you need for the Spark View engine. Click Install, and it'll take care of installing all the dependencies, and then you close. The next thing that we're going to do is to modify the global.asax.cs. I'm going to clear out the existing view engines, which will mean that you can only use Spark. If you want to be able to use the other view engines, you can skip this step. And then I'm going to add the Spark View engine. So I need to create a new Spark View factory, and then I'm going to have to add the appropriate using statement here using spark.web.mvc, and then I save my changes. You can see the using statement got added. So now I'm going to do some work on my views. The first thing I do is delete viewstart.cshtml because I don't need that for Spark. Next, I will start to rename my files. I want to rename the extension from cshtml to Spark. And I'm going to do that for each of these views here. Visual Studio asks me if I'm sure that that's okay, and I respond yes. We need to look under the shared folder. We've got some views under there as well. We need to rename layout cshtml to application.spark, and that's going to be our main layout file. And then finally we're going to rename air cshtml to air.spark. The next thing I'm going to do is go into global.spark and add a namespace. I need system.web.optimization, and that is used to render styles and render scripts within application.spark. Alright, so I saved the change there to global spark, and for some reason I got an error there. I'm not quite sure what that was about. We'll go back in and check global.spark, and it did save the change that I had there. It's complaining about the XML document having multiple root elements, but that's not important at this point. So now I'm going to go back to each of my views and start to format them to use the Spark syntax. So I can use a pound to execute C# code. That's what I'm going to do when I set a value in the view bag. And then instead of using the add, I'm going to use $ curly brace and surround with a curly brace on the other end. And that's the difference between the Razor syntax and the Spark syntax there. So next I'll move on to contact.spark, and we just have the same few lines at the top that we need to modify. Pound to execute the code, and then use the $ and curly braces. Going to do that for both viewbag.title and viewbag.message. And then we're going to save the change. Next we're going to look at index.spark, and it only has the one line that we need to modify. So we'll go ahead and do that and hit save. We already took care of global.spark. Let's look at air.spark real quick, and there's nothing to do there. Finally, we want to look at application.spark, and this is the most involved change that we have here. We're going to go ahead and change from the @ to the dollar curly brace for styles.render and scripts.render. Those are the lines that we actually added that using statement for earlier in global.spark. Now we're going to format this HTML action link, and I don't believe we need the @ anymore, so I went ahead and removed that. We do need to add the curly brace on the end, and we're going to have to do the same for the remaining action links here. Replace the @ and surround with the dollar and curly braces. So once again, what we're doing here is setting up to use only Spark, but you can also have it coexist with Razor and or ASPX if you desire. Now I'm going to update the syntax for that datetime.now.year. We'll go ahead and save changes, and I need to modify my scripts.render lines. Now I've got 2 extra lines I need to take care of: render section and render body, and Spark uses a little bit different syntax for these. So we're going to do use content equals scripts, and that will render the scripts section. I'm going to take a similar approach for render body, but there is a particular name that is used instead of body. Use content equals view, and that actually renders your body. It's the equivalent of the Razor render body. So now I'm going to rebuild my solution, and I just went ahead and I'm going to close all the documents here and launch Internet Explorer to debug the solution, and we should see that everything looks the same as it typically would when we launch a new MVC project using Razor, but instead it's going to be using Spark. Here's our home page, and everything looks pretty good there. So I'm going to go ahead and exercise the various links here and make sure they work. About takes us to the About page. Contact takes us to the Contact page. We're going to go back to the home screen here and test out each of these little link buttons. You can see those are going to ASP.NET. They seem to be working alright. NuGet.org, that worked. And then finally a hosting related page. So everything looked good. That is how you set up an ASP.NET MVC web application for the Spark View engine. I hope that you get some valuable use out of that, and feel free to leave any comments if you have anything to say or have any questions.